When I was a little girl here at Manchester UMC, I remember being told the story of the flood and Noah's Ark. And after the teacher got done telling us the story with little wooden Good Shepherd figures, one of the children asked out loud, "So, is this story real? Did this really happen? Is it true?" Those are three separate questions, but they all kind of point to the same thing. It's, can we trust that the Bible has stories that are true and stories that are factual? Personally, I think that something can be true without it being factual. Aesop's fables are a great example of that. Did a tortoise and a hare actually have a race battle in the middle of the prairie? Probably not. But does slow and steady win the race? Sure. Sometimes I think that what the Bible is doing is teaching us great truths, if not great facts. And truth might actually be a bit more important than facts, at least to some people. Now, not all Christians agree on that, and that's something beautiful about our tradition. There are people that believe in something called biblical inerrancy, and that's what we're going to talk about today, inerrancy versus inspiration. Biblical inerrancy means that you believe, if you believe that the Bible is inerrant, that every single thing in the Bible is factual. It's scientific. Every single word that you read actually happened in real time, exactly as it was written. It was perfect. The people who hold on to this belief do so because they believe that if the Bible proves to be imperfect, then God might prove God to be imperfect. Some people believe that. Some Christians believe that. Now, United Methodists don't believe that. We don't have a doctrine of inerrancy. We believe that the Bible was inspired, that God inspired the writers of the Bible, but that the people who were inspired were not perfect, and nor did they get the story exactly, perfectly correct, and nor would the Bible be filled with facts all of the time. Different Christians have different ideas about this, and just because the United Methodist Church doesn't believe in biblical inerrancy doesn't mean that you can't. You are allowed to believe whatever you want. Some people go to the far side and say, yes, the Bible's the absolute perfect truth, word of God. Everything in it is exactly as it happened in history. Some people lean more towards that inspiration, that, the Bible was inspired by God and probably has some facts, but is mostly about truth. And some people go even further and say, yeah, the Bible's there to teach us morals and lessons and stories, and most of that stuff probably isn't grounded in history. I'm kind of one of the middle category people. I know enough about, sites where biblical events took place to know that some of these things for sure did happen in history, at least according to archaeology. But I don't know that I believe the Bible to be inerrant, perfect, or the answer for everything. I also don't think that an imperfect Bible makes an imperfect God. So let's turn to a Bible story to talk about inerrancy versus inspired. This is a story of Abraham and Sarah finally getting pregnant with their son Isaac. It starts in the 18th chapter of Genesis. The Lord appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre while he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. Abraham looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. "Where is your wife Sarah?" they asked him. "There in the tent," he said. Then one of them said, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife will have a son." Now Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent, which was behind him. Abraham and Sarah were already very old, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed at herself as she thought, "After I am worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure?" Then the Lord said to Abraham, Why did Sarah laugh and say, will I really have a child now that I am old? Is there anything that is too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son. Sarah was afraid, so she lied and said, I did not laugh. But he said, yes, you did laugh. Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah, as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had promised him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore him. When his son Isaac was 8 years old, Abraham circumcised him as God commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. And she added, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. Sarah lived to be 127 years old. She died at Kithra Abra in Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham went on to mourn Sarah and to weep over her. Abraham lived 175 years. Then Abraham breathed his last and died at a good old age, an old man and full of years. And he was gathered to his people. His sons Isaac and Ishmael built him in a cave near Machpel, near Mamre, in the field of Eshtaron of Zohar the Hittite, the field Abraham had bought from the Hittites. There Abraham was buried with his wife Sarah. After Abraham's death, God blessed his son Isaac, who then lived near Beher Lahal Reo. Okay, so here's this story about a woman getting pregnant at 90 years old and able to deliver the child, who then lives into she's 127, and Abraham lives to 175 years old. So do you believe that that's fact? Do you believe that that's fact? And that would point to you having a belief of biblical inerrancy, that the Bible is filled with facts. See, for me, not only do I not think that that's fact, it just doesn't matter to me if it's fact. Because there's a greater truth in the story. This greater truth about Abraham and Sarah and their son Isaac. See, a long time before this story took place, God made a promise to Abraham and Sarah that they would have a child, that they would have children, that they would have descendants. To me, this story teaches us a truth that God makes good on God's promises, a truth that God never leaves us even when it seems like what we need is impossible. God will find a way, God will show up. That's the truth of the story to me. I don't really mind one way or another if it's factual, as long as I have that truth, that God is a God that keeps promises, then I'm feeling pretty good about the Bible.